One of my favourite YouTube channels to binge has to be ClickSpring. A few years ago he made a video on how to make files. Ever since that video I wanted to try it. I decided to try it out of Damascus to see what I could do. The first step in the process is to create the chisel to cut the teeth of the file. To do this I put some 01 tool steel in a vise, ground a profile on it, and then carved out the tool. Looking back, I should have used a much heavier piece of steel for this chisel and had a lot more weight behind the tool. This is one of the things I'd change if I did this again. Once I finished shaping the tool, I heat treated it by using a blowtorch and some oil. I then tempered it in an oven at 200 degrees for 2 hours. The next step in the process was to coat a small anvil I had in some pewter. Pewter is a nice soft metal which meant that the file shouldn't slip around too much when we're cutting the teeth. Now I should have used a much heavier block of steel for this rather than this one, but this one worked okay. And I really need to learn how to pour metal without spilling it. I flattened out some of the lumpier bits on my other anvil just by hitting it lightly with a hammer. I then used an angle grinder to cut the blank for the file from the billet. This billet is just one I purchased from eBay a while ago. I'll put some links in the description to similar materials online. After I'd finished grinding and shaping the file blank, I then used a blowtorch to anneal the metal to make sure that the chisel could cut the teeth into the file blank. Once I'd annealed the file blank, I then put it in this jig I made by gluing 3 pieces of wood together. I then covered both sides in permanent marker pen, just so I could see any high spots or low spots as I was stripping the metal with a file. Once I was happy with how flat the file was, I then moved on to using some water stones to smooth the surface and get a nice surface finish. Once I was happy with the surface finish, I then moved on to cutting the teeth into the file. Now I used elastic bands to hold it down, but this wasn't a good idea because it slipped around a lot, and the oil I used also degraded the rubber and they kept breaking. I should have used leather like Clickspring did in this video. I eventually got a hang of the process, using each previous chisel mark to guide the next one. I wish I'd used a much heavier chisel and also used a heavier anvil. I cut teeth into both sides of the chisel and did a crosshatch pattern on one side. I then mixed some water and chalk together and coated the file. This was to stop it oxidizing whilst heat treating. I tried to coat it as thickly as possible, but the way I did it worked well enough. After heat treating, I then cleaned the file up with a Dremel wire wheel attachment. I then did 2 15-minute ferric chloride cycles before going on to a coffee etch. I did initially make a handle for the file, but I decided I didn't like it, so I just bought one off eBay. I cleaned up the metal ferrule using some nail polish remover and then gun blued it. I also made sure that I didn't double dip into the bluing gel and used a clean cotton swab each time. After 24 hours in the coffee, I took the file out and buffed it using a Dremel buffing wheel. I also used some fine grit abrasive paste and then moved on to gluing up. I used some clear Gorilla Glue because I couldn't be arsed messing around with epoxy. After the glue had cured, I realised I really didn't like the plain handle, so I decided to char it and then use some Scotch-Brite to knock off any loose charcoal. I then used some beeswax based furniture polish to get the finish I wanted. I did several coats of this and then buffed it out using a clean cloth. This footage was after the ferric chloride etch, and I just wanted to see what the file could do. As you can see, it cuts pretty decently and takes off a fair chunk of material, but this is only brass. I decided to try this on some 01 tool still. I will say it didn't cut very much material at all, but it did cut it. Overall, I gotta say I'm pretty pleased with how it came out. It looks pretty cool, it's a pretty cool thing to have. Now if I was going to do this again, I'd make sure that I used a heavier cutting chisel and a heavier anvil. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching.